Now, welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll that asked the question, how do you feel about the special editions of the original Star Wars trilogy? Afterwards, I'll be reading and responding to some of your comments, as well as showing off the artwork and other such things that were sent into me this week. Okay, and let's just get right to the results, where we'll see that of the 45,000 people who voted, 10% said of the special editions that they were great and had no issues with the changes. 51% then said they were okay and are fine with most of the changes. 19% then said they're not a fan and find most of the changes unnecessary, while 7% think they're an abomination and they should have never been messed with. We also had 13% of people who have never actually seen the original versions of the original trilogy. And if we go ahead and remove the 13% who haven't seen the originals and don't feel like they can judge, and then we recalculate, the split here pretty much is 70% of people either think the changes are anywhere from mostly okay to great, against 30% who think they're mostly unnecessary or just plain horrible. But the real story was once again in the comments, since, as usual, there is a lot of nuance to this question, or should I say the answers, that 5 choices to pick from simply cannot cover. So let's kick this off, as we always do, with the top-rated comment, which this week came to us from Vault69, who said, honestly, most of them are fine, like improving the colors and making Cloud City look better. Some just seem unnecessary, like the rock in front of R2, and the added CGI creatures, but the ones like Greedo shooting, Ben Kenobi's scream in Episode 4, Jedi rocks, and Vader's no in Episode 6, I really dislike. And no surprise here, but a lot of comments this week came from people talking about or listing off the changes they liked and or didn't like, and I'll get to several of those comments in a bit. And though there were certainly some of those who just flat out didn't like the fact that any changes were made at all, thinking the movie should have forever been left alone, which is a fine stance to have. Despite what a handful of people implied in the comments, you're not a hater just because you didn't think George Lucas's original works should have ever been tampered with, even by George himself. Anyway, yes, there were those out there who didn't like any of the changes, but most people do seem to believe there is at least some good or a lot of good to be had in the changes. It's just that not everyone agrees on what was good and what was bad, though I don't think I saw anyone against some of the color corrections made or other technical fixes that were done. The other thing I didn't see anyone against, and there were actually a ton of comments made about this, one of which I'll pick now, and it comes from Michael K., is that the problem is the lack of option. And he's of course referring to the fact that you can't just go out to a store and buy or order somewhere online a quality copy of the original versions of the films. In fact, the last time they were released, or officially released anyway, was back in 2006 on DVD. Problem with that is they basically ported over the Laserdisc version of the films, and they're in a non-anamorphic format, or not widescreen. And so if you play them on any modern TV, not only are they going to look pretty rough, but you're going to have black bars everywhere, ending up with one relatively small boxy picture in the middle of your screen. And I honestly believe much of the controversy that still surrounds the special editions would just sort of dissipate if good quality versions of the originals were officially released. And I say officially because there are some great despecialized versions out there for you to enjoy, and they're not too hard to find. I'm sure some links to them will appear in the comments below. Either way, I don't know entirely why George Lucas was so against releasing them when he was still in charge of Lucasfilm, other than he just wanted everyone to watch what he himself considered the final versions of the films, which I can understand. There were plenty of things visually that he likely wanted to do back in the late 70s and early 80s that were impossible with the technology of the time, and that he was never quite happy with. He even said back in 1997 about the special editions that a famous filmmaker once said that films are never completed, they are only abandoned. So rather than live with my abandoned movies, I decided to go back and complete them. Okay, moving on now, we have this comment from Renae Narvaez, who said, I like that they put Hayden in the end of Return of the Jedi, but I'm pretty sure that's because I grew up with the prequels, so it felt more meaningful to me seeing it. And leaving alone what Anakin should or shouldn't look like at the end of Return of the Jedi, technically that change wasn't in the special editions. It wasn't until the 2011 Blu-ray release that Hayden Christensen replaced Sebastian Shaw. And no, I'm not trying to be a dick or ridicule you personally, Many people brought up changes that were actually made in later versions of the film and called them special edition changes, which is fine because, really, the special editions have sort of become a term used to represent or indicate any changes made at any point to the original trilogy. I mean, in all reality, you have the original versions, then you have the special editions in 1997, you then have more changes made in the DVD release in 2004, more made for the Blu-ray release in 2011, and even one more made for the 4K release on Disney Plus in 2019, though that was just Greedo saying McClunky during the infamous scene in A New Hope. And speaking of that scene, that brings us to two more comments. First, this one from Wesley Stewart, who simply said, Han shot first. Then we have this one from Lynx Whatever, who said, even after all these years, I still fail to understand why Han shooting second is such a big deal. It changes nothing about the story nor his character. Okay, so one thing to point out here, and you can just say it's a case of semantics, but originally, Han didn't just shoot first, he was the only one to shoot. Greedo never actually fires in the original version. Then in the 1997 special edition, Greedo shoots before Han by like a half of a second perhaps, and just flat out misses, and then Han shoots and kills him. Later editions have them firing at basically the same time, and Han actually is doing this little head dodge, which I think was in the 97 version too, which is kind of irrelevant because the bolt would have missed him anyway. But I guess the real question here is, why does this even matter? Well, I'll give you my very brief answer because there are many other comments to get to. But for one, it makes Greedo out to be utterly pathetic. He's a highly trained bounty hunter pointing a gun across a table at someone, and he misses. Second, this whole sequence is our introduction to Han Solo, and it really defines him as a character. And as I've said in other videos, it is one of the best introductions to a character you'll find not only in Star Wars, but in any movie. His whole goal here, from the moment he's confronted by Greedo, is to get the hell out of there as quickly as possible and by any means necessary. He doesn't care at all that he's about to kill Greedo, and as soon as he sits down, he starts to free his gun from his holster because he is planning on killing him. Not shooting him only if he absolutely has to, or if Greedo shoots first. He's willing to kill someone to get away, and then afterwards will show no remorse when he tosses a coin to the bartender and apologizes for the mess before just coolly walking out of the bar. And so when you change the scene, you go from a character who is skirting that ever so fine line between flat out murdering someone and killing someone in self-defense, to one who, especially in the 97 edition, when Greedo shoots first by a good half second, to one who simply got very, very lucky that Greedo missed somehow, and then reacts to him being shot at. Basically, it changes our perception of just what this character is capable of doing. Anyway, let's move on from that. I'm sure there will be some fun conversations about who shot first in the comments below. And let's move to this comment from Goaty McGoatface, who said, "You silly people are kidding me, right? Making Luke scream like a little bitch while falling is gross. In the original, he was being a mega badass, rather dying than joining evil, and accepted his fate in silence. Now he screams like a bitch, ruins it. Han shooting first just makes more sense. The weird Jedi rock song sucks. Han's line to Lando when he was about to fall into the giant desert vagina monster mouth was more true to his character. Everyone should have picked one of the last three answers." Well, I certainly do admire your passion and agree with most of your points actually, other than the last one about people having to pick one of the last three options. Anyway, the absolute biggest change I hated in the special editions was having it where Luke screamed like a bitch, as you elegantly put it, after he let go and fell to what was likely going to be his death in The Empire Strikes Back. Him falling in silence was just far more powerful and emphasized the self-sacrificing choice he'd just made, over making it sound like he instantly regretted his decision by screaming out. And thankfully, they removed the scream in the Blu-ray release, so once again, he falls in silence. Moving on, let's now get to this comment from Cryo Judgment, who said, "Everyone says they hate the new edition, but did you even see how Palpatine looked originally in Empire Strikes Back?" Then we have this comment from Master M, who said, "In my humble opinion, I believe Empire Strikes Back was the best of the special editions. Adding Ian McDiarmid as Palps, the Cloud City Walls edit, and even the Wampa made it much more enjoyable for me. But some changes were odd, like the changed lines with Luke and R2 before meeting Yoda." And well, now that the Luke scream has been removed, I can comfortably say Empire has the best changes. And the only one that really bugs me still is Vader saying, "Alert my Star Destroyer to prepare for my arrival," over him just saying, "Bring my shuttle," in a very pissed off way. Though I'll also say that I'm torn on adding Tamora Morrison as the voice of Boba Fett, and he of course voiced the clones and Jango in the prequels. Yes, it's obviously great for continuity, but I do miss that old Boba Fett voice. Okay, next up here we have this comment from David who said, "I'm absolutely in favor of updating anything CGI in any movie as time progresses and technology advances. I'd be fine with CGI in episode 1 and 2 being completely remade, and what I'm not okay with is with changes to the stories or scenes." We also had this comment from Owen Gennard who said, "The CG just feels clunky. Honestly, without it, the universe feels more grounded and alive. The movies are still very good and are miles above the insult that is the Disney trilogy." And though it might initially sound a bit contradictory, I pretty much agree with both of these comments. Yes, a lot, if not most, of the CGI they added in the special editions sticks out like a sore thumb and doesn't feel like it belongs, like the Jabba scene in A New Hope, which does look better in the 2004 edition, and the Jabba scene in Return of the Jedi, or the Jedi Rocks musical number. But then you also have the attack on the first Death Star in A New Hope, and the CGI enhancements made to that scene were so well done that people rarely mention it. I read through all the comments, and this one here from Inspector Who Reacts is one of the few that even mentions it, which could be seen as a good or bad thing, I suppose, but as they point out in the comment, I'll take it to mean it's so well done and seamless that most people don't even realize things were changed. As for updating the CGI of the prequels in some places, especially something like the ground battle of Naboo with the Gungans versus the battle droids, that's something I'd enjoy seeing. Hell, I'm one of those people who wouldn't mind seeing the prequels redone in Clone Wars animation style. For fun, of course. I'm not implying they should replace the real prequels. Alright, let's get to just a few more comments now, starting with this one from Blake Gifford, who said, "Honestly, I'm kind of surprised with the results. I'm 17 and was lucky enough to grow up watching the originals on VCR, and yes, I actually still own a VCR TV just to watch them. Anyways, when my dad bought the original trilogy on DVD, I was pretty shocked with all the changes. I found them really unnecessary and even distracting. Every time something was changed, I would notice and it would draw my focus away from the movie as I sat and wondered why on earth did they make that change, or my god, that CGI looks awful. I personally can't and honestly won't watch the redone versions. Instead, I plug in my old TV from the 80s and pray it doesn't eat the tape as I watch the movies. I really wish they would just release the originals again. They could make so much money. I would happily pay over $60 for the original trilogy if it was, original." Next up then we have this comment from Neil who said, "To be honest, I grew up with the original cuts, but I never threw a fit over the special editions. There are some bad changes like Han not shooting first and Vader saying no, and some CGI, but I really find them minor. Overall, I do think Lucas should have released the original cuts just to calm the original trilogy purists out there." And finally here we have this comment from Kiadi Mundi who said, "My 1995 VHS box set is still in near mint condition. According to the internet, it was the last available release of the pre-special edition trilogy prior to the 2006 DVD release. I found it at a garage sale in Virginia almost 10 years ago, and it's probably my favorite piece of Star Wars memorabilia to date." And it's kind of funny you mentioned that 1995 VHS box set, because that was the year I got my very first quote-unquote real job, and with my first paycheck, the first money I'd ever earned for myself outside of doing chores to get an allowance, I bought myself that box set, and it was to replace the original tapes that I'd had since, well, forever it seemed like. And the reason I needed them was because, well, for one, it was a remastered version, and for two, my old original tapes were so bad, especially Return of the Jedi, that certain parts would literally not play anymore, and I'd have to eject the tape, manually advance the film, and put it back in order to keep watching. Anyway, it's kind of sad that if I want to watch the original version of the Star Wars trilogy, some of the best movies ever made, my best option is to watch a set of tapes I bought 25 years ago, or I could always hunt down a copy of the terrible 2006 DVD release or the laser discs it was copied from, or to essentially watch a pirated, despecialized version that some passionate fan created. I can't just get my hands on and own a good, legal, new copy of those original films. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about the special editions. Do you love them, hate them, or, like most people it seems, do you appreciate some parts of them while not being a fan of others? Whatever you think, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.